Well, we're already off to a great start this morning. Excited to move into a conversation with CEO of Chick-fil-A, Dan Cathy. And Dan, we're going to talk this morning about nonprofit leadership and innovation. The nonprofit leaders, we've got about 200 nonprofit leaders that are with us today. Okay. And those folks never stopped working. They didn't stall, they didn't stop, they were on the front lines. You know, I like to think of them as our other essential workers, yes. Right? So they were out there serving the needs of the community and solving social challenges as they became greater and greater in the midst of COVID. So I'm just so excited that we can bring this conversation to them today. So Dan, one of the things that we did was we actually surveyed about 50 of those leaders and asked them, what are some of the things that you'd like to hear about? What are the hottest topics for you that would benefit you right now? And innovation and leadership were some of the top things that they were looking for. So today, that's really what we'll be talking about. So I want to tap into your brain around innovation and leadership. And you know, when I think about you, and many folks, when we think about you, we think about the creative mind. Think about your vision for so many projects and how you have just sort of stepped out and led in the space of doing things differently. So I'm hoping that we could talk a little bit about that and you can share some of those stories.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, sounds good, sounds good. So what I wanted to do was really start with you personally and how you approach innovation. How you tackle new ideas. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, I think, you know, innovation is so critical today because the norms and the environment that we're in today is so radically different. We are having the digitization of society, whether it's in social media or an app interface that we want to have with our retailers, and even the way digital life in the digital age and in the information age has been such a game changer that to continue to use our old systems and processes in an analog history when we're now in a digital world makes us all obsolete. I mean, all these systems and processes that we've had, you know, using calculators, you know, writing things down, you know, carrying a pen, carrying change. You know, I don't carry a pen. I don't carry cash with me anymore. And I haven't for a number of years now because life has changed. You know, why continue to carry, you know, and burden our organizations with a lot of things that have just simply have become obsolete? And we're going to have to do some spring cleaning. We're going to have to kind of clean out the closet of the ways that we used to do things that just don't work anymore. Mm-hmm. And as leaders, if we continue to hang on to the old ways, we'll not be able to attract the next generation of talent that's needed to continue to lead our organization. So I think it's particularly important for leaders to personify the fact that they're not living in yesterday, but they're living where the puck is headed. And Wayne Gretzky was the famous hockey player. He said, you know, asked in an interview, why did you get inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame? He says, well, and I love this quote, he said, I tried to skate where the puck is headed, while all the other hockey players, they would skate where the puck is. And you can imagine, it was only just a nanosecond of his intuitive sense of where things were headed. And because he got there faster, because he was anticipating, that differentiated himself, and therefore he's in the Hall of Fame. And I think that's true in business. I think it's certainly true in the philanthropy section as well. That it all gets down to leadership. And so the definition of leadership that I really like a lot is that leaders are influencers. And leaders have to take people oftentimes to a place they've never been. So we as leaders have to be going to places that we've never been. We have to make it high on our agenda that we're reading books, that we're listening to podcasts, that we're traveling extensively, either virtually or literally traveling a lot to see a lot of things that are going on, so that we can fulfill the unique role that we have, as leaders. I think the innovation is key to that, because innovation is much like a recipe. And if you think of a cook in a kitchen, there's a lot of seasonings, in the kitchen. And it's just going to be a unique combination of some seasonings that make things unique. I'm a musician. We got 66 keys on a keyboard, and there's endless permutations and combinations of chords and rhythms and melodies and so forth. And so it behoves all of us in leadership role to think of innovation as coming up with new, fresh things that are compelling, that get people excited. A quote I read recently that I really loved from the famous philosopher Mark Twain. He said this about leadership, and I loved what he said. He said, travel is lethal to prejudice, bigotry, and small-mindedness. And I really resonated with that, because I found in my own life that the more I travel, the less prejudiced I am, the more accommodating and accepting and seeking to understand rather than being understood, the less bigotry I had in my life, and the more acceptance I had. And in terms of small-mindedness, travel just opens up the lens, the aperture, of our minds to endless possibilities. So let's be well-traveled.
It's really about exposure, right? Exposure to others, their way of living, exposure to new ideas.
Yes.
So there's really a lot packed into to what you said.
If I could, just a comment that I found in my role with Chick-fil-A, for instance, that I could learn a lot from McDonald's and Wendy's and Burger King and Panera Bread. So no question, there's subtleties of the ways we've had to deal with problems and find solutions that they also have had to deal with. I can find little things that can make improvement. However, the real game changer things that we've done at Chick-fil-A, to be quite honest with you, did not come from those within our competitive brand set, but came from industries that were outside food service. Years ago, when we got into teams, we studied Johnsonville sausage. We studied the Saturn plant up in Tennessee. We studied businesses that were in the film and motion picture industry that had components that really kind of catapulted us forward. I had a conversation with Hort Schultze with the Ritz-Carlton. They were talking about $300 or $400 a night for a hotel room. How would they contribute to a brand that our average price point is, $7, $8, $9? But Hortz challenged me one time in a conversation with him. He says, "You're the best of a bad lot. You've got nothing to be proud of. You should aspire to do dramatically better service, not just incremental, but do something very dramatic." And as a result of that conversation, we did an extreme service makeover about 17, 18 years ago that now is proven to be the main sustainable differentiator for our business. Came from that one conversation from a guy that runs a $400 a night hotel, where breakfast costs you $25, and dinner is going to be at least $50 or $60. But yet that dramatic difference in the way they approach how you create value at that price point had, in principle, had some very, very applicable ways and some simple things that we can do to show honor, dignity, and respect at Chick-fil-A. And it's been a tremendous game changer for us. So we've got to keep having those conversations and pushing ourselves to have conversations with people where we're really willing to dramatically change the patterns of our thinking.
That's great, because a part of the Chick-fil-A Impact Accelerator is really bringing leaders together so that they can share and learn from others, some in the same nonprofit space, Others are leaders of industry, leaders, corporate leaders, leaders even in entertainment. We have participating in this. And so even though the folks participating in this experience are virtual, we're creating some opportunities that they can get into chat rooms and speak with each other and share. So hopefully this is an opportunity to increase our networks as well.
Well, the one thing they have in common, in being a part of this experience today, is they have an appetite to learn. They have an insatiable appetite to learn. Maybe they're motivated by some pain spots within their organization, maybe a lack of resources, maybe some frustration. So all those are good contributing factors to help us cultivate and curate an inquisitive mind and curiosity. People change for three reasons: pain, fear of consequence, or vision. So maybe the people participating here, maybe they feel a lot of pain and they're ready to take their hand off the stove because they feel that pain and they're going to make some changes. Maybe they anticipate that maybe 2022 coming up this next year is going to have a whole nother set of challenges, which I'm sure it will for all of us. And in anticipation of those fear of consequences, if we don't change, then we're going to be motivated to listen to the content today. And those are pretty easy to motivate people to change when the oven is hot and when we see potential consequences. The more difficult thing as a leader is to convey a sense of vision of the possibilities when maybe things are going good. Maybe there are no looming thunderclouds on the horizon.
So folks aren't ready to change because things look good.
Because everything looks great. That's why the vision has to be very, very exciting. I love the quote that little dreams stir no man's heart. And so as a leader, I highly recommend think big. Be bold, be daring. The bolder, the bigger the vision, the easier it is to captivate people's imagination.
So Dan, can we talk a little bit about the challenge of that? So you said so many great things. Have you ever had a time when you anticipated where the puck was going and you were excited about it, got out ahead of it, and it didn't work out?
Yeah.
It failed.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about that?
It's all too fresh to talk about some failures. I was with the group last night, and we had a project that was working on that just didn't work. It just did not work. It primarily did not work, financially. And as I was sharing with this group, I wanted it to be a rich learning experience for them. This is a lot of young adults who needed to know that that's just the life of, being a visionary at times. It's not everything, it doesn't always work out. So that's why we be careful. Don't bet the whole farm, on one idea. Things need to kind of incubate for a while. They need to grow organically. Sometimes they need to grow incrementally so that you can test the validity, of the new ideas and so forth that's there. I shared with them that my dad, who was a serial entrepreneur, had the willingness and the boldness to continuously think of a lot of interesting new ideas, new restaurant concepts. And I rattled off a list of about 5 or 6 that are skeletons in our closet that did not work. Now, the Flaming Torch, Truett's Pizza, Marco's, a retail chain called Love Shops. That's a whole nother story.
I don't think I've heard of some of these before.
I could go down the list of some other things, but he wasn't discouraged. He wasn't emotionally bankrupt because of it, or financially, because it was an incremental thing. He tried it. He didn't bet the whole farm on it, but he was always incubating on it. So people that follow leaders need to sense that they got some things they're incubating. So one of the outcomes I hope from today is let's make sure that we not only have the main pot on the stove, but we got some things simmering over here, on the back burner, as we call it, so that if we need to, we got several options that are there. When we went into 2020 at Chick-fil-A, Little did we know that the Chick-fil-A app that we've been working on for 7 or 8, 9 years, that iPads out in the drive-through that we've been working on for several years. Little did we know the new digital transaction process that we had going on and the way that was going to interface back in the back of the house with our kitchen. And I could go, little did we know when those things were incubating back on the back burner, that all of a sudden something dramatic was getting ready to happen. And we almost hardly missed a beat. We made a quick transition during March and April to shifting all of our business out to that parking lot, completely shutting down our dining rooms. And as a result, we not only survived 2020, I would argue we actually thrived in 2020, and it catapulted that differentiation. So it always pays to have things, ideas that you're incubating, back in the back burner. These are little experimental, kinds of things that you're incrementing, you're incubating along the way.
I really like your thoughts around having the main pot and then some peas simmering on the side, right? Have you had a time where you had the main pot, you had the idea, you had the vision, you had taken the time to really cultivate it and build it before sharing it, just as you said, and then you put it out there and others just couldn't see it?
Yeah.
They couldn't come along.
Absolutely.
Can you tell me about that?
You just have to live long enough. You can build quite a little list of all those kind of experiences. I remember when we began to have a vision for doing a dramatic change, an extreme service makeover in our Chick-fil-A restaurants. At the time, 18 years ago, prior to that, we had what I would refer to as janitors, rather than hosts and hostesses in that dining room. We had a janitor, if you will, that had a spray bottle in one pocket and a wet, oftentimes dirty rag in the other, cleaning up that dining room. It was just a custodial, kind of service. There was very little interaction going on. There was little service that we were offering. I mean, this is, quote, fast food. This is takeaway business. The traditional norm in our industry had very little service. In fact, most of it was trying to suck service out of it to cut back on labor costs, rather than leaning forward and putting service, more into the experience. And so to convince our operators that they were probably going to pay $2 or $3 more an hour to have a host and a hostess in that dining room, versus a janitor, that was a big stretch. We weren't hurting at Chick-fil-A. There was no pain. There was no real fear of consequence. The only thing we had was a vision of what could happen. How would the customers respond if we put fresh flowers on all our tables? How would the customers respond if we had pepper grinders in a fast food, dining room? What if we upgraded our language, and rather than saying, yeah, no problem, and maybe we began to say, my pleasure, or may I refresh your beverage? Well, that was a real stretch for a lot of operators. And to be quite honest with you, it actually took us 2 years. Wow. Because it couldn't be mandated. It had to be, people had to accept it and want to do it. And thankfully, we had some pioneering operators who were willing to kind of give it a try. It took several months even for them to reskill that dining room and to begin to get some positive feedback. The customers were noticing this is a distinguishable difference in my eating experience vis-a-vis the other competitors that were out there. And it led to what is argued as a sustainable competitive advantage that it was very difficult for our competition to replicate what we had going on in that dining room. And it's continued to give that differentiation for us. So, even nonprofits, are competing,
Yes.
For funding. People that are contributing to nonprofits want to know that their investment is being stewarded, properly. If you steward these gifts properly, you're going to continue to get happy, satisfied customers, if you will, benefactors, supporters, when they see strong, courageous leadership. They're making good choices. They're attracting great talent. They got a clear vision of where they want to go, and they're doing it in a very unique, way that's exciting and compelling. Those are the kind of ministries and nonprofits that benefactors want to invest in.
I wanted to shift a little bit and talk about some of your community leadership and innovation. We've had an opportunity to really talk about some of the innovation at Chick-fil-A and how critical that's been for the organization as we move forward. But so many of us also think of you and the work that you do in the community and how you've been a visionary and brought forward some ideas within community and nonprofit service. You serve on a number of boards. You serve on a number of advisory committees. And so for those nonprofit leaders out there that may be thinking, well, he leads this national corporation that has...
Soon to be international.
Soon to be international. This is true. That has all of these resources and that, scales the nation, is one of the leading restaurants or is the leading restaurant in the nation. How could Dan possibly get his head wrapped around the work that we're doing as a nonprofit? Can you share some of the partnerships that you've had, some of the thinking and recommendations and ideas that you've brought to some of the nonprofit work? We've done a lot of work right here in Atlanta, on the west side of Atlanta. But do you mind sharing some of that?
Surely. Well, those of us in the marketplace, the free enterprise system, essentially, leaders are really good problem solvers. And in culture, it's very easy to see a lot of problems that are there. And it becomes, very compelling as we look out in society and culture to see, can we ignore that? Can we just keep selling chicken and forget, the challenges that we face, in our own community? As we look at our neighborhood here in Atlanta, we see tremendous economic prosperity that's here. This has been a city on the rise for, generations. It's been an incredible city, the international city, the celebration of the 96 games. We birthed a moral cleric, Martin Luther King Jr., who led in for our nation and for our world about the consciousness of civil rights based on racial backgrounds and cultural backgrounds and so forth. So we've had so many great things that have happened in Atlanta, but yet we look at one section of Atlanta that's been left behind. As I think of it on the clock face, it's the 9 to 10 o'clock section of a clock face that was left behind. That had a 40% depopulation in the last 20 years. That has a 20-year life expectancy difference between that area, often known as Bankhead, versus the very prosperous area of Buckhead, which is, hardly 10, 15 miles away. 20-year difference in life expectancy. And so when we become aware of these problems, our heart has to be touched. Then our mind goes to work as problem solvers thinking, how can we turn this around? And when that happens to me, I always like to go, who's done this before? Who can I learn from? And we were very much inspired within our own Atlanta community of Tom Cousins, who also was a businessman, a problem solver, and used his skills to transform what was then known as Little Vietnam in the East Lake, later to be referred to as Purpose-Built Communities, a partnership with our former Mayor Shirley Franklin. So many things that we can learn from. So, when our heart is touched as leaders, let's quickly survey the best practice out there that accelerates our learning curve, that compresses that learning curve so that we can find solutions quickly. And that's what we've done, through the work that we've had going on with the West Side. And it's a team sport. It's taken a lot of private sector marketplace leaders to rally together. I was so thrilled as we had 17 over 20 Atlanta CEOs that camped out with us all night
Yes.
We opened up a Chick-fil-A right there on MLK.
18 degrees, I remember the
Yes,
night well.
yeah, 18 degrees. It's gotten colder and colder as people have told that story, camping out all night long. But it represented a solidarity of the business leaders of Atlanta that, yes, we do have a problem. We do have a moral conscience, and we're going to help be problem solvers, and we're going to cooperate together. We're going to set aside our logos and our egos, and we're going to embrace this as a challenge. And I'm happy to report that we've seen a dramatic drop in crime. We've been able to keep the remnant, as they call themselves, there. There's an incredibly wonderful cooperative spirit. Nobody's being left behind. And we're seeing the renaissance of historic West Side of Atlanta.
And it's a partnership between corporate and industry leaders, community leaders, and nonprofits. And so I love the collaboration that has taken place. Are there any nonprofits that come to mind for you that you've seen work in the innovation space particularly well? Perhaps some you've worked with or some that you've observed?
Yeah. I've observed some that haven't worked so well and ones that have worked well. That's why I say as a benefactor, as one that wants to help fund successful ministries and social organizations, I encourage my peers, do your due diligence. Don't just let your heart drive your writing a check to these organizations without doing your homework. Know who that board is. Know how accountable is leadership to a board that's overseeing the day-to-day operations. I have been so heartbroken and disappointed that I've often written checks to inept leadership. That's why this program is so important, is because we all want to elevate our leadership game so that we can be responsible for the stewardship of funds that are coming our way, that we can lead courageously. So do your homework. You asked specifically, a number of great organizations, come to mind. I think of City of Refuge, led by Bruce Deal. They developed the West Side Future Fund. It's not just a philanthropic fund of capital, but it's also providing leadership to help coordinate all the different ministries and social organizations that are part of this whole renaissance of historic West Side of Atlanta. So the West Side Future Fund has been a wonderful agency of an overview of that umbrella organization to convene and bring these people together so we can learn quickly and accomplish our mission.
And I recall when that convening first came about, there were probably 30 people in a room in the bistro at City of Refuge. So it took great vision and innovation to bring folks together and say, no, this will be a vehicle that can bring, or an avenue that can bring all of the folks that have vested interest in this community together. It's also access, right? It's an opportunity. I mean, when I look around that room, you have people on a monthly basis or twice a month that are coming together that probably wouldn't normally find themselves in a room together, right?
No doubt.
So it's really an opportunity and access on so many different levels. So we actually asked a few of the nonprofit leaders that were going to be participating today, hey, if you had an opportunity to ask a few questions of Dan, what would they be? So, so here are some of our audience questions. The first one is that, and you've probably already answered this, but I'm going to give it to you anyway. Leaders can easily face burnout, especially amidst a global pandemic. How do you keep dreaming ahead and keep innovating? Where do you find your inspiration?
Yeah. Well, I love what we're told when we get on the airplane and we go through the safety procedures. And even if you have little ones sitting next to you, as a parent, put your oxygen mask on first. Now, we love our little child, but if mom and dad passes out, they're not going to be much help to the child. So we as leaders, have to put our oxygen mask on first. That doesn't mean that we're so self-absorbed that we're oblivious to everybody else, but we need to take care of ourselves mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. We've got driving, compelling, visions and things that we want to see happen. But we can't do that if our lives begin to break down. So I find that when I read a lot, that helps keep my mind alert and revived. When I emotionally keep myself in a happy spot, thinking positive thoughts, joyful thoughts, that helps out a lot. Physically, to get the sleep that I need, to run, exercise, that really chemically inside my body, keeps me very healthy to have, affirming positive thoughts. And certainly spiritually, because the reality is we do face a spiritual battle that's out there. And so we need prayer time. We need worship time. We need scripture. We need to be tithing to make sure we're taking care of ourselves, spiritually as well. So put your oxygen mask on first.
Okay, self-care. Yeah, love it. So this question is really on culture, right? And it says culture is a big part of Chick-fil-A. How do you continue to keep a pulse on that with your team and your staff? How do you keep the culture and the environment strong, especially in times like these?
Yes. Well, every organization has a culture. The culture's there. The question is, are we happy with the culture? Is the culture productive? Is the culture thriving? You can see manifestations of that in turnover rates. Cultures that are strong and vivacious, they attract, talent. They see leaders that are listening to podcasts, bringing you ideas, and great talent wants to draft, off that leader, if they're in training. You may have noticed on my name tag here, Carol, that I may have 50 years of service, but I'm still a trainee. I'm still learning, and this isn't a joke with me, because I do want to be learning and not complacent. So that's how we keep great talent flowing into the organization, is we keep that forward momentum, anticipating where things are going. A kind of a closing thought for leaders that are here. I've never been to an Alcoholics Anonymous program, but I've heard reports about what they're like. And in fact, today it's like an Alcoholics Anonymous, deal. We're all just being honest with each other. We're willing to confess our doubts, our fears, and so forth. We're also willing to learn. And so I think today offers such tremendous opportunity, for people to learn from one another. We have an important mission. It's an important mission. Everybody that's part of this has got important work to be done. It takes strong, healthy people to be the first responders to those that are hurting. And so this work is very important. So let's take a lot of notes, because God and the society, it needs our heart, it needs our passion, it needs our skill to be diligent, to make a difference. And I'm honored and so appreciate you giving me this opportunity to encourage people.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for your time and for your encouragement. And I know our leaders that are participating today are really going to benefit from it. It's been a pleasure, Dan.
It's been my pleasure, as we say at Chick-fil-A.
As well. Thank you.